Good evening and welcome to the Murky Waters Horror Review channel. On this channel I will be reviewing a number of horror games. Tonight, join me for the very first episode of the series. We will be reviewing The Evil Within.
.184 copy, code 3, ETA 3 minutes.
Copy 184.
Sorry, detectives. I know you're just coming off a case, but I'm afraid we're gonna have to make a detour.
Everyone is always looking for the next big game to give them a good scare. Back before its release, The Evil Within looked promising, with its gameplay trailer showing off its hide-and-seek mechanics and some solid horror locations. It was released in October of 2014 on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and just about anything else at the time that could play games. The game was the newly formed brainchild of director Shinji Mikami of Resident Evil fame. Mikami had previously worked on the now legendary Resident Evil 4 as well as the original Resident Evil under Capcom. However, he was free from those corporate shackles and back with his own company, Tango Gameworks. The Evil Within was Mikami's first game under the new company, and was his first horror game in the director's seat since Resident Evil 4. Was Capcom holding back his true genius all this time, or did he need their firm guiding hand in order to keep him from going full Kojima on the project? Well, let's find out when we review The Evil Within. To some, the story may seem overcomplicated. To others, it's non-existent. The Evil Within is not exactly your typical shady corporation creating bioweapons or searching through a haunted town story. The game starts out simple enough, with protagonist Detective Sebastian Castellanos and his team speeding towards a hospital to answer an emergency call, only to be greeted with police caution tape and a very unhelpful hospital staff. After a bit of sleuthing stepping around the corpses, Sebastian finds the security monitor and witnesses a dreadful apparition. Just like that, Sebastian is attacked and awakens to a nice, pleasant musical score. While hanging in a room full of unfortunate individuals being butchered like cattle. Preferring to keep his blood and organs on the inside, Seb does the unthinkable and overpowers his captor. Seb does the sensible thing and steals the keys from the large, brutish maniac and escapes the hospital scratch-free. Or does he? What precedes are a series of rooms where Seb will have to run, hide, and sneak past the sadist as he stalks the area, chainsaw in hand, and let's just say he's not what you would call a sensible man. This, however, is only the beginning, and the story will take more twists and turns than the hedge maze at the Overlook Hotel. The story is primarily told through character interactions. Sebastian arrives at Beacon with his partner Joseph Oda and junior detective Julie Kidman, but you'll soon be separated after the opening section. Journal entries and various other collectibles can be picked up and will give some insight as to what's going on. It will no doubt be a confusing ride, but if you put yourself in these characters' shoes, they have just as little idea as to what's going on as you, the player, does. The goal of unraveling the story is secondary to the character's will to survive. And what does it take, exactly, to survive the world of the Evil Within? Let's find out, shall we? If you were expecting the game to be a hide-and-seek thriller such as Outlast or Alien Isolation, well, I'm afraid you've been duped. Yes, the E3 trailer sure had us fooled into thinking The Evil Within was something it's not, showing off footage of these opening moments and a few other cherry-picked moments from later in the game, when in reality what we had was yet another action-heavy third-person shooter with emphasis on set pieces. This is all starting to sound familiar. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Those looking for a legitimate horror experience will find one here, just not quite in the way one might imagine. The Evil Within has its moments of overwhelming tension, but the true horror lies in the game's combat mechanics. This may sound like a negative, but it's actually quite brilliant. In early survival horror type games, control over your character was of key importance. In Resident Evil, you played as police officers who had combat experience, but the tank controls and fixed camera angles were there to purposefully disorient players and make you panic as you stood in place hoping a zombie would drop before getting close enough to grab you. And these feelings would only further escalate when faster and more dangerous atrocities were introduced. In the original and brilliant Silent Hill games, combat was also slow, sluggish, and not every attack was designed with precision in mind. The Evil Within has its own take on this kind of combat. Seb is no ordinary man. He is a seasoned detective and has combat experience. However, the weapons at his disposal aren't exactly state-of-the-art. His pistol, for example, is an ordinary revolver. It gets the job done and can deliver some nice headshots or knock a foe down, but the accuracy is purposefully dreadful, making some close encounters a panic-inducing nightmare. All of the guns have some downside like this. The shotgun is your typical boomstick. It will blast away the haunted hordes that corner you and can turn their head into a geyser of gore when they invade Seb's personal space. However, ammo is greatly limited, so you can't rely on it forever. For long range, you get a single-shot bolt-action rifle, and if you needed further proof that the weapons are intentionally designed to be panic-inducing, try getting a headshot through this scope, as it distorts your vision and won't stay steady. And lastly, the most versatile and devastating piece of equipment Sebastian gets his hands on, the Agony Crossbow. This thing does it all. You can use it like a normal crossbow and fire harpoon bolts that drop at an angle and can pin enemies to a wall like their Halloween decorations hung by Michael Myers, but that's just the beginning. Scattered around the area are traps meant to bring serious pain to Sebastian. However, if you're careful, these traps can be disarmed and their parts used for crafting various different bolts for the crossbow. Disarming the traps usually amounts to a simple button prompt at the right time, or a set amount of time for Sebastian to do the work. The different kinds of murder you can craft with the parts include flash bolts that blind enemies and leave them open for stealth kills, or just give you a moment to breathe. Explosive bolts for those moments where you just can't seem to shake off the horde or are face to face with a more devastating foe. Freeze bolts that have chilling results, and shock bolts. These don't kill enemies but will stun them in place, making them useful to set up as traps. Spare parts for the bolts can also be picked up around the area in toolboxes. These are freebies and you won't need to disarm traps to get them. Sebastian is also a bit of a pyromaniac, as boxes of matches are one of your most useful tools. One match can set fire to several enemies, so knocking down a weak one and letting some of the stronger ones run onto a falling match can set a whole group of the bastards on fire, ending them and saving you tons of precious ammo. Scattered around the battlefield, you'll also find explosive barrels because this is a video game. Shoot them and you can guess what happens. In other situations, shooting a lever can cause spiked platforms to fall on unsuspecting monsters. Monsters in the game stem from the twisted mind of the main antagonist, Ruvik. Ruvik is the mastermind of this world, and throughout Sebastian's adventure you will uncover the meaning behind each of his creations. The most common type of enemies are the Haunted. These Cenobite lookalikes come in various forms from small to large, armed and unarmed. Unarmed ones can grab you and knock Sebastian down, while armed ones usually flail around a sharp object or try to take one good swing at Seb. Dynamite-wielding Haunted also show up and hang out in the background or sprint directly towards Sebastian. You can end these ones immediately with a shot to the dynamite or end them slowly by shooting them in the knee and watching them explode themselves. There are stronger varieties introduced with masks to guard against headshots, and others don full riot gear. The stronger tiers of Haunted become less zombie-like and start using firearms such as shotguns, automatic weapons, and sniper rifles. The worst of the Haunted, though, are the Invisible. These Haunted can't be seen unless they take damage or if it's already too late. They can be spotted tracking through puddles or bumping into equipment around the area. A shotgun blast to their Zoidberg face will usually knock them down, leaving them open to a fiery death. Beyond the various Haunted, Seb will encounter underground dwellers known as alter egos. These are ungodly abominations made from man and beast sewn together like Siamese twins. They may be creepy to look at, but their monster head is their weakness, and if knocked down, they can be burned just like the regular Haunted. The most horrific and fear-inducing of the bunch, though, are the Trauma. These are large monsters nailed to a wooden beam, broken at one end with hooks attached, ready to impale Sebastian. The Trauma will rush towards Seb the instant you are spotted and can cause massive damage. If you were saving your more powerful guns and ammo and encounter one of these, now is definitely not the time to be stingy. The Trauma are so intimidating that at one point I spotted one in a room filled with flammable gas and panicked. One revolver bullet later, and I believe the entire Earth was destroyed. To aid Sebastian on his journey through the stages is a safe haven that Seb will be transported to at various points throughout the story. Sebastian can also transport himself here through mirrors found throughout the stages. It's within these walls where you'll meet Nurse Tatiana Gutierrez.
Whatever are you talking about? You are the only soul here.
Tatiana is absolutely ice cold. The way she talks to Sebastian with her monotone voice and deadpan expression that never changes, you'll be questioning yourself if she's even real or just a coping mechanism Seb created. However, she is your only consistent ally throughout, and she'll always be there to greet Sebastian and explain new game mechanics, such as the green gel.
My goo! My precious goo!
Green gel is currency that can be dropped from eviscerated foes or found around an area in glass jars. How do you spend the green gel? By strapping Seb down in a chair and jamming needles into his veins, of course. In this chair, you can upgrade Seb's abilities from improving his body to improving his gun's performance and how many items he can hold at once. Unlike similar games such as Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space, Seb can only hold a capped amount of ammo. This will add to the tension of combat and force you to make use of your entire arsenal. You cannot rely on one single weapon, even if it's your favorite. The only way to even have a reserve of ammo is with the lockers inside the safe haven. Throughout stages of the game, you'll come across angel statues. Smash them apart and you'll find a key. These keys can open one of the lockers lining the back hall of the safe haven. Inside you'll find a random item. It can be green gel, ammo, bolts, health, or another key. Seb is not a greedy man, and only takes a few bullets or one healing item at a time, so if you want to save some for a difficult boss or horde, this is your only chance to do so. The last purpose of the safe haven is a home for your collectibles. Inside you can take a peek at the newspaper to see what's going on outside, or look over the missing persons board. Lastly, inside the back hall across from the lockers is a giant empty space on the wall. This is where your collected map fragments will appear one by one as you find them both in and out of the safe haven. Collect them all and you will be rewarded with extra killing power upon your next playthrough. Back in the Nightmare world, the game progresses on a chapter-by-chapter basis. You will have a task you need to complete before moving on to the next chapter. Some chapters are more open-ended with plenty of room to explore, but all the chapters still follow a pretty linear complete the objective or get to the end of the section approach. At times during combat-heavy sections, Seb will be paired with Joseph or Kidman. These sections aren't quite escort missions, as your friends are perfectly capable of defending themselves, but if they do die, it's game over. Speaking of game over, the game over screen in The Evil Within is its most terrifying aspect. Mini-boss monsters can be a challenge, but some of them can be extraordinarily frustrating. You'll soon realize this in Chapter 5 when the infamous Spider Lady Laura shows up. Despite Sebastian clearly stating that he'd better run away,
Shit, I'd better run!
the internet's still flooded with complaints about her being cheap. With her abilities to teleport in rapid succession and pound Seb's face in the goo by so much as breathing on him, it's no wonder so many people became frustrated and probably traded their copies into GameStop soon after. Those who did stick it out though, were only greeted with several more monsters that could beat you with the all too powerful game over stick. Certain set pieces would have Sebastian meeting an untimely end for so much as a misstep as well, and puzzles usually amount to the correct answer and the instant death answer. I would like to briefly highlight the Keeper. You have no doubt seen him in screenshots or promotional material for the game, and he does share a striking resemblance to another famous monster, but his inclusion is implemented so much better than some of the other mini-boss monsters. He can't kill you in one hit, but he's tough and he will take some powerful ammo to put down. Killing him only gives you a moment to breathe though, as the area he resides in will be littered with safes that he can use to respawn. It's up to you whether or not you want to waste ammo in exchange for the big jar of green gel he drops every time, or if you want to avoid him and try to get the puzzles done without wasting resources. Early on, the game proves it's not a classic return to the horror games of the PS1 and PS2 era, but an evolution of the action horror genre started with RE4 and continued throughout the 7th console generation. If you aren't into these kinds of horror games, I wouldn't expect you to be into this one either, but if you're like me, adding horror to other genres only makes them better. Take a game like Uncharted and add horror, you get The Last of Us. Take a game like Final Fantasy and add horror, you get Parasite Eve. Being mostly an action game with heavy horror elements is not as dreadful as some people make it seem. The problem was in the marketing, tricking people into believing they were buying the next big game to make them wet themselves with fear. That game at the time was Alien Isolation, and it was released just a week prior. In reality, what they were buying was a game that expected them to die and die and die some more. However, don't misread my words. Unstoppable monsters in horror games are a good idea, but having them end you as soon as they catch you is not. Nothing kills a horror boner faster than frustration. Seeing a grotesque monster sprinting towards you and being told to run is terrifying. But being caught, killed, and reloading the same monster introduction 5 or 6 times in a row will have you raising a middle finger at the screen, and all the work the developers put into trying to scare you is for nothing. That, unfortunately, is the biggest downfall of The Evil Within. It is obsessed with coming up with more gruesome ways to kill Sebastian, even tallying up all your deaths at the end of the game. My death toll at the end of my first playthrough on Medium was 58. For this review, I replayed the game on Nightmare difficulty. Here's how that went.
Oh, now we're getting the proper reaction.
For those seeking a challenge, you will not be disappointed, but be warned, not all challenges within are fair. Sometimes the game will spawn clones of Rubik that blend in with the normal Haunted. These guys can spawn Laura once they spot Seb and will kill you in one hit. The real Rubik can also spawn in certain points and kill you in one hit. The Sadist has his chainsaw and can kill you in one hit. One of the later bosses in the game takes this concept to the extreme by introducing a death blow where he can eat Sebastian whole. On top of this, he's faster than Sebastian, which will back you into a corner and force you to use a shock or freeze bolt. And if you don't have them, well, I hope you have a vor fetish. Before moving on, I'd like to offer some words of advice. The Evil Within expects you to search every nook and cranny for means to survive. Enemies only drop so much, so you'll want to look in drawers, dark corners, around background dressing for items that will blend in and smash every box you come across. After a successful slaughter of a mob, it's always a good idea to make a sweep of the area for items they dropped that you might have missed, as well as unactivated traps you can disarm and boxes you didn't have time to smash open. I could definitely sit here and ramble on and on about what makes this game what it is, but there's just so much that happens and each area feels unique in its own way. I think it's time to move on and discuss some more technical aspects of the package. The Evil Within is still an impressive looking game even in this dreadful year of 2020. While you can play the game on PS4 and Xbox One, just remember it's a 7th gen title. The game's performance, however, is woeful. Across every version of the game, you will encounter severe texture pop-in. Each time the camera angle changes or a new area is loaded, you'll see each layer of the world pop in one by one, and this really kills the atmosphere. Console players are out of luck here, but on PC, installing the game on an SSD will nearly eliminate the pop-in. It will still occur, but think half a second versus 3 seconds. The PC version is also the version I would recommend, as it's the only version that can be played at higher resolution than 1080p and higher FPS than 30. If you are planning to pick up a console copy, you can't go wrong. The PS4 and Xbone versions will obviously look nicer than their PS3 and 360 counterparts, but the older gen versions do have a much smaller install file. All console versions are capped at 30 FPS, so don't think grabbing the later gen versions will offer a better frame rate. Beyond performance issues, the graphics, lighting, and sound are pretty top-notch for the time. Character models are highly detailed as well as monsters, giving a pretty nice variety to the most common enemies, the Haunted. All you need for proof of the great lighting in this game is Sebastian's lantern. Most games of this nature might give you a flashlight, but in this world where technology seems to have peaked in the late 1800s, Sebastian illuminates the dark areas in real time with an oil lantern that he can carry in his hand or place on his belt. Sound design does mostly a great job. There is one negative that I will get to, but the voice acting is genuinely good and the game's antagonist is even voiced by Jackie Earle Haley, the voice of Rorschach in Watchmen and Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985.
The ambient music is subtle when it needs to be and has nice touches like the volume dampening when Sebastian is crouching. The game is filled with dirty, grimy, slimy, and gooey surfaces that all look as great as they do disgusting. Oh, and if you have a weak stomach for gore, this may not be the game for you. Now my complaint about the sound. The Haunted. These are the most common enemy type around, and while they are visually different, they all sound the same. They emit a whirlwind of hisses and growls and can be difficult to pinpoint where they are when attempting stealth. A Haunted in a room next door by itself can sound like 2 or 3 of them, and 2 or more in a room can sound like a party bus full of them. Throughout the game, you'll run across voice recordings of Ruvik talking about his experiments. These will give you a little insight onto who he is and why he does the horrible things he does. In other instances, you'll run across ghostly memories of Ruvik interacting with other characters in the story. He is an interesting villain for sure, and I always enjoyed hearing the dreadful stories he had to tell. There are so many interesting things to look at, and if you're the kind of person that likes to check out scenery in games, it not only rewards you with some great set dressing, but oftentimes you'll find items or little Easter eggs that you weren't even looking for. While playing the game again for this review, I tried to grab some of the collectibles I missed, so I looked up a guide, and just read this without any context of what's going on. These little moments of insanity are all throughout the experience, and just when you think you've seen it all, the game throws a chase sequence at you with a giant spider monster that has tubes connecting its mouth to its anus, forcing it to live eternally off its own feces. If I had to live like that for longer than 1 second, I'd be looking to kill anything that moves too. But the question remains, is this a journey worth experiencing? The question that is always asked when talking about horror games is, how scary is the game? That all-important question is enough to make or break a recommendation. However, I can be comfortable in saying that The Evil Within is not very scary, but is still an excellent horror experience. Call it fan service if you must, but The Evil Within goes above and beyond to try to give every horror fan something that they will enjoy. The game's damning fault is its difficulty and mishandling of some of the monsters. On normal mode, the game already feels more difficult than it needs to be, as well as just a few chapters too long. A first run on normal should take you around 15 hours to complete, and a second run should take you around 8. If you're the kind of person that looks forward to a second playthrough, you are in luck. The game offers an abundance of collectibles that you probably will not obtain your first run without a guide, and the amount of green gel Sebastian can pick up is not enough to fully upgrade all of his abilities. I will almost always suggest you play your horror games blind first, but on a second playthrough I recommend using a guide to collect everything you missed. Having the game's unlockable weapons and a fully upgraded Sebastian will make you feel so overpowered you feel sorry for the poor souls trying to attack you. A fully upgraded harpoon bolt becomes a firebolt, and it can decimate almost anything in your path, including Laura. It's so satisfying feeling like a god against so many foes that trampled you on your first playthrough. The game does have 3 pieces of DLC. 2 of them are stories that run parallel to Sebastian's where you play as Julie Kidman, and the last one is an arcade mode of sorts where you control the Keeper in first person and take on several of the game's bosses. I won't get into the DLC for this video, maybe in the future, but I will mention that the DLC is all digital only. There is no complete physical copy of The Evil Within, which is a bummer. But now, on to the game's ranking. I am giving The Evil Within an A ranking. It is a must-play for horror fans, and copies of the game are dirt cheap nowadays, so pick up a copy at GameStop or on eBay for $10, or just wait for a Steam sale and grab a copy for a measly $5. Even people I know who complain the entire game about this or that still saw it through to the end, so I can't believe they disliked it as much as they let on. So go out there and add the game to your back catalog if you haven't done so already. This concludes the first ever episode of the Murky Waters Horror Review channel. Stick around and click on that subscribe button if you dare. I will be here reviewing horror games from old to modern, good or bad, and if you would like me to check out a specific horror game, well, leave a comment below. Until then, have a nice evening.